We post all of these on augie.edu/strengths, so that we can kind of have a library. So as people want to learn more about StrengthsFinder, they can see resources. Today, first of all, hi, I'm Jeff Vennekamp. I'm the Director of Student Conduct. As always, I'm here with my good buddy, Brent Olinger. Say hi, Brent.
Hi, and I am the Burke Soccer Hall Director, and then I also work with UBG on student activities.
Both Brent and I are certified strengths coaches, and so we do these every single Wednesday at 3:30. We pick a different talent or theme, and we kind of try and talk about it, trying to give tools to people, you know, to see how they can experience their life in a more fantastic and amazing way. So today we are going to talk about harmony. By a show of hands, how many of you have harmony in your top 5? Everybody except Brady. All right. So you this is going to sink in well to you. So just to affirm what harmony is, and you can thumbs up, you can, you know, give me any kind of affirmations if this talks to you, but you want peace between people, and you try and bring people together. So if they have disharmonious moments, you are like really aware of them, and you're like, oh, stop, there's some disharmony happening here. You are very adept at seeing points that people have in common, even if they can't see it. Does that sound like you? Alyssa's shaking her head a little bit like, yeah, I can kind of see that. Same with Michelle. You seek helping other people work together. Like, I want to find moments how I can help people work together. And then the one that I think is really telling is sometimes you avoid conflict. Okay, I see a lot of shakings on that one too. And I think what an interesting time to be alive and have harmony. And because from my non-harmonious perspective, I see a lot of conflict in our world, right? It's seemingly everywhere. And so it's very hard to find common ground. And so what an interesting place for you guys to be so aware. How about, somebody have any examples of something that they've avoided, like a conflict that they've been like, oh, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to deal with this. Political conversations between parents and grandparents. Like, that's the one. You go to my family at Thanksgiving, and I have a brother-in-law who is polar opposite end of the spectrum than my other brother-in-law, to the point where they almost come to blows with each other, right? It's one is hardcore, I only watch Fox News, and the other one worships Rachel Maddow. This is the opposite end of my family spectrum at Thanksgiving. And there are people that have this harmony that are in the middle, and as soon as they start talking politics, they just get up and walk out of the room. Like, I don't want anything to do with this conversation. So that's the hyper end of avoiding conflict. Brett, do you have harmony in your top 5?
I do not.
Okay.
Harmony shows up somewhere in like my last 30. So
yeah, Brent has no problem telling people they're wrong. And
but I think, like, you know, if I were to give y'all advice for the folks who do have harmony, which I think that's a majority of you, I think kind of knowing when to pack your bags and know, like, this might not be a conversation where consensus is happening. So, like, I think not necessarily packing up your bags, but I think being aware of, like, what's the point of the conversation? How much influence do you have in the conversation? If it's two people who like to have a political debate, that might be the point of it, to point out differences. So I think it's important to be like, to understand what's the context of the situation, and is there room for building consensus? There probably always is, and you probably have always the tendency to do that. But I think just also communicating, what are we trying to accomplish here? So when you're working in your groups, obviously people aren't always going to agree when you're working in, you know, project groups for classes, or when you're working in your student organizations. So I think one of the things you can also do is tell people, like, here's a connection that I see that both of you might agree on. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I would jump into the idea of finding areas, because you see it so naturally, even if people are on the opposite ends of whatever, red grapes and green grapes debate, I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum. You see the common grounds that so naturally between people. And so being able, rather than turning it off and avoiding the conflict, but stepping into it and saying, hey, let me point out what I see, that you both love grapes. And can we start from the starting point that grapes are, you're both agreeing in that. So we don't have to have a debate over, we don't need as much conflict as we see. To me, that's a really strong value that you bring to the table, because you see that more naturally than other people. And sometimes our strengths come out and we don't think there's any, we think everybody sees things the same way, and they don't. And that's what we know about strengths, is that you see things differently than other people.
Yeah. I think you also have a natural ability to be like, all right, we're approaching conflict. So I think there are times where I know that's uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable for you to express, but if you're in a group and saying hey, I notice we're just kind of getting to a point of disagreement, or just acknowledging, hey, I notice the room's pretty tense because we have some strong disagreements. Can we talk through how we make a resolution? Even if you hold the group accountable to form a resolution, or if you have one, and explain your thought process through, I think that can be helpful when you're working in groups as well.
Yeah, I would add to that even a strategy to use, because oftentimes conflicts, like in groups, end up being between two people, right? Like this really strong personality and this really strong personality have decided to go at it, in some way. A strategy that you can use is to say, hey, third person, what's your opinion on this? What do you think we haven't heard from you yet. Could you add a voice? Because oftentimes a third voice or a fourth voice, or saying, can we hear from the rest of the room? The two of you are obviously not in agreement. Can we hear from everybody else before we have to, separate the two of you, if that's what's going to happen? I think it's important to acknowledge that conflict is sometimes necessary, and we should have vigorous debates with each other. And so what you get to do and is you can certainly find the common ground, which we've already talked about, but then I wonder if you can also find partners in the room that have high command or activator or restorative, any of those talents, that you can be like, these people, all three of those strengths are really willing to just take action. Command people are willing to walk into a room sight unseen and be like, oh, I'll take charge. Let me say something, because they're willing to make mistakes, and they have that boldness that goes along with that. So partner with them and say, can you step up? The activators are quick to be like, okay, let's just take action. We're not going to agree, but let's at least get started on something and get moving. I think also a restorative, restorative people are really good at seeing seeing exactly what's not working and trying to fix the one thing. You're so good at seeing the common ground, they're good at fixing it and creating common ground. So I would suggest finding those three talents in your room. And it should be easy to find restorative. Restorative is number, 3 at Augustana or something like that. 30% of the student body have restorative or something like that. So you're all fixers. Let's see. What else should we talk about, Brent? Let's talk about academics, right? This is probably one of the things that would be real valuable for you is when you're dealing with your studies. One of the things that I might recommend that you will benefit from is, well, maybe I'll start with a question, because I think this might be valuable. When you see conflict happening, raise your hand if your first instinct is to just shut down and to be quiet. Okay, so there's a lot of people that are like that. My instinct is to shut down. So one of the suggestions I might make is understanding the professors that you get to choose from. There'll be some courses where you can choose, like what professor do I work with? And asking about a professor's style, because some professors like confrontation. They lean into it. Because they want the vigorous debate. They want conversation to be contentious. They want to be controversial in that way. And if your instinct is to shut down when you see contentiousness, maybe that's not the right professor for you to take a class from. If your instinct is going to be to turn off, well, you don't want to turn off through lectures, or you don't want to turn off through those things, right? So just knowing that about a professor might be really valuable. And then courses to think about is like mediation skills, right? Like you could really become super powerful if you could learn how to mediate better, right? And if you could learn to communicate more effectively. So thinking about classes, like when you get to elective courses, thinking, where can I learn mediation skills? It might be an ethics course, it might be philosophy, certainly an extra communication course on how to communicate effectively might be really powerful for you, because you're naturally going to want to find connections for people and find ways to get people together. How to connect with them is really important. Does that sound reasonable to anybody as you're choosing those paths?
That's what I took for my well-being credit.
What was it?
Communication studies, or communication 110 or whatever. That's what I took for my well-being credit.
Nice. And I honestly, I feel like I should have done a little bit of research to find out if there's a mediation course, right? Like how to mediate. But anything you can do, even workshops on maybe some social justice, as work with Willette in the diversity office about racial healing, or building bonds. How can we get through some of those kind of conflicts so that you can really solidify your personal opinion about these things and do the work on your personal opinion, so that you can be really confident walking into it going, look, I'm happy to find common ground because I know what I know. You're not going to convince me one way or the other. I'm in, Brent,
Yeah,
I feel like
I would
I'm
just
talking a lot.
I would just reiterate the conflict resolution class. I know, being an RA in college, I know there were like portions of it. Well, it wasn't a full course, but then I think I did in grad school, eventually end up taking a conflict mediation course to like be a professional mediator. I mean, that was the person that was presenting it, and that was just really helpful to like acknowledging all the different stages of like going through mediation. And part of it is even just, especially when it comes to avoiding conflict, is like managing your own emotions, because when there's something contentious, your heart rate goes up. Your body is biologically designed to like sense danger. And in those moments, that's like what you're doing. You're having that physical reaction. So even in that moment where you're like, okay, I really want to shut down, just being able to like take a few deep breaths, like that's the best piece of advice for at least starting it, is really pausing yourself, grounding yourself, and then kind of maybe reiterating what someone had said, and then maybe talking about any connections through consensus that you see.
Another thing, just piece of advice, and I promise we will let you guys talk more than we're talking. We need you to talk more than we're talking. But another thing that I think is really good for you, because you can be kind of a class negotiator in this role, is if you have a professor who's often changing assignments, changing due dates, kind of just moving the class around a lot, it's okay for you to step in and ask the professor the why of that. Like, Because what happens if that happens too often, the class starts to be like, this seems unfair. Is this due on Tuesday or is this due on Thursday? And I don't want to be missing a deadline, so it causes more stress. But if you understand the why we're making changes, why we're moving, then you're the mediator of the class and the professor saying, well, we're making a move because not everybody was able to attend, or we're making a move because this semester a third of the students aren't able to participate because they're in isolation or quarantine somewhere, or they have a different reason for not being available. So making sure that you are capable of understanding the why we're making changes is really important and valuable, and something that you could easily and should be able to easily step into. I think I got two more pieces of advice for you, and then we'll ask you guys some questions. Okay. Two more things for me is with studying. Sometimes people with harmony have said that they turn off if they don't agree with the author. Like, it's hard to study a subject if I don't agree with what we're talking about. So if you're talking about ethical leadership and somebody's trying to discuss that ethical leadership is a joke and unimportant because you need to be effective leadership, and I don't care if it's ethical. If you turn off on that, then you'll have a hard time studying because you're not interested in the topic. So if you find that that's happening, first look for a piece of information where you agree with the author. So as you're studying and as you're going, okay, the author is kind of right about that, then build off of that moment, build off of that experience, and say, okay, well, if I can agree with the author on this, but I can disagree about this, you're looking for common ground with the topic. And so that'll help you. And the point is, don't let disharmony turn you off of the topic or the author, right? Don't let your own disharmony with it turn you off. And then my last piece before I'll let Brent and you all talk more is when you talk about careers and choosing vocation and moving forward in your life, now is an amazing time for you to test drive careers. You are in a perfect time in your life where you can I want to try this career out. I'm going to take a part-time job working in this field. I'm going to take a part-time job working in this field. I'm going to jump from job to job because you're test driving. You're test driving careers, but not only about the career and the vocation and the place that you're going to work, but really pay attention to the type of manager that you're effective with or that affects you the most. Because what you really need to understand is when you go for a professional job or your first full-time job, you want to be able to articulate, here's the kind of manager that works best with my harmony. Because here's what I need from an effective manager. And here's what a manager's skill set looks like to make my life better. And it'll be different for all of you. So I can't say like you're looking for this kind of manager because you'll all react very differently. But I think it's important for you to know which manager is best for you. And they all have different styles. And quite honestly, some managers are horrible at it, but they're really effective. And some managers are really great at it and horribly ineffective. So you have to find the right person and the right personality that works for you. Okay, Brent, now you talk for a little bit. I'll take a breath.
Yeah, the only other thing in this,
I
think this just applies to any and all of your strengths, is just like communicating about your strengths. So knowing that you have harmony, like when you're working with a supervisor, when you're working in teams, like you might not be apt to share your opinion because you're really wanting to try to get to a consensus. Just saying that to the group of saying like, I really value what other people are saying, and I really want us to come to common ground. Or if someone asks why you aren't sharing, I think just being open and honest with people about like why you're operating the way you are in groups, and even like what you need, from a supervisor, from a role that you're in, being able to articulate what you need is going to make you better in whatever role you are, but it's also going to allow people to like advocate for you and be effective for you if they understand you better and your needs in a role.
Okay, so we've done a lot of talking. Now it's your turn. I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to ask everybody to say one thing about harmony that they know about themselves, or one thing that we said that you're like, oh, this made a lot of sense. So we're going to do the Brady Bunch thing, and I'm going to start with Alexandria.
Okay. I know that like the whole avoiding conflict thing is something that I definitely tend to do. But also the negotiating thing was something that was mentioned. That's something that I am really good at. Like if I realize that if I can't get like this out of the situation, I can negotiate and find a common ground in certain situations like that. So
People with harmony are so good at finding win-win situations. Way to walk out of a room with a win-win. Whether it could be small, but you got a great talent there. Brady.
So I don't have harmony, but I definitely see some aspects to where I am harmony, or in a way, I guess, just because the avoiding conflicts, I definitely do that. And
it could be very much in your top 10, Brady. It could be something that you experience a lot. Just because it's not in your top 5 doesn't mean it's something that you don't experience on a regular basis. All of my strengths that I really wish I had, I just claim them all as number 6.
yeah,
like,
but I did.
I have 1 through 5, everybody can see, and I have number 6, and that's all the rest of them.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely like talking about harmony, because there's a lot of things that are aspects to it that I'm working on, is like that negotiation, finding a common ground, and also finding that win-win situation, because I'm more of a strategic person, so I kind of like strategize a lot, and I don't know, that kind of affects my finding of the win-win situation, I guess. But
that's awesome. That's what I would say. Great negotiators are probably really strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably a really great skill set with strategic thinking, going, how am I going to move people from here to here?
Yeah.
And understanding the plan and the first set of consensus, like we talked about earlier, finding one piece of common ground so people can turn off their battle and turn into, oh, I can see where we're together,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like finding one spot, whatever. Good strategy.
Brady, I also have like 4 of my top 5 are in strategic thinking. So
yeah.
I know I've really enjoyed like doing conflict mediation and things like that, but I do think of it and I gamify it in a different way. So I just come from a different approach.
Yes. But
Michelle, one thing about our presentation or one thing about harmony that you know. Oh, you're muted, honey. That was very, very,
I totally forgot.
parenty. I'm sorry.
Yes. I like to move to a resolution and like not shut off different ideas, because I just see that sometimes like more conflict can arise when you like close off to and you like part ways more if you don't like try and find something that like works together. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Alyssa?
I can say that my first year at Augustana, I probably was like I was the silent person who's like, oh no. Then I kind of like started dropping jokes or changing the subject or something, trying to like be like, oh, but you guys both did this. So like I was just, and now I think of myself like I'm the conflict resolutioner in my friend group. I guess you could say the glue person, that like is like, Alyssa, I don't understand. And so I guess that's a different strength too, but I can say that harmony is definitely needed.
Yeah. All right, Scott.
There we go. I don't know. I enjoy my harmony strength like when we're in a group, say like discussing something, just like talking about something. I have an election too, and I love an election. So let's say we're like talking about something, like getting deep in a group. if people have conflicting ideas, I think it's fun to have harmony, because then I can like, you know, like make people like talk to each other and like talk through their conflicts until they aren't conflicting anymore, or at least until we have a little mix of all the ideas there. But I feel like when I'm alone, like if I'm just having a conversation with somebody else and it's like them sharing their ideas and me sharing my ideas, sometimes I feel like it's harder for me to like really dig in and assert what I think when I have harmony. So I feel like in a group, it's really neat, but when I'm alone, it can be kind of a curse sometimes. I don't know. I have really mixed feelings about my harmony strength.
I would think it might be hard because, correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody with harmony in like a group, they can see other people and they can try and find common ground. But when it's you versus somebody, it's kind of hard, because all of a sudden you're like, now I have to be the one in conflict. You know, like I can see conflict on the outside and I can see it very clearly between these two people. But when it's me and the other person, now all of a sudden I have to act in a very different way. I'm not, I feel like especially if it's an issue that I'm passionate about, then it's harder for me to be or the disharmony is harder, because it's my personal opinion now that we're trying to talk about.
Yeah, Scott, I'd say it's definitely easier to just agree with whatever they're saying rather than try to like start an argument. So I definitely agree with that.
We had a VA, and I love this guy. He was a fantastic VA for us. He was a 3-year VA, and he worked on the north end with like sophomores and juniors, and then his last year he worked down on the south side with first-year students. And he said his harmony was so strong that he would actually like he says, I almost lie to people to kind of avoid disharmony.
Absolutely.
So he had to learn not to do that, because of course that's not productive and instructive. So that's a real challenge.
I don't know if it would help, but I think the same like conflict mediation, like if you can try to like, it sounds weird to like separate yourselves into two people, but like you are the only one in the room at that moment to advocate for you. So like, what would you be doing to advocate for someone else if they were in the room? So I don't know if that's easy for folks with harmony, but I guess that's a way to look at it so that everyone can come to a better resolution, even though I'm sure that will still be challenging.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, we got our 30 minutes in. We're going to wrap it up. Next week, we are going to talk restorative. So next week's strength is restorative. It's on the same bat channel as this bat channel. And so thank you for coming. I will make sure that the 5 of you get put in for a core value event. So congratulations on that. And then come back next week and we'll talk restorative. And it's just working with more people. Restorative, kind of a highlight of that is they see things that are broken and want to try and figure out how to fix them. So might be a great partner for somebody with harmony to work with. Anyhow, anything that you want to say, Brent?
I think we're good.
All right. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll see you next week.